Hello and welcome to the disability module. In this presentation, we'll deal with the models of disability. This is quite important, I think, because we have seen that in the previous presentation about epidemiology of disability, we've seen that disability is still associated to discrimination and stigma, and this is a sort of current theme across the whole human history about the attitude of normal people towards disabled people. Some of you may remember this movie. This was a 2007 movie starring Richard Butler called 300. It deals with an historical event, the Battle of Thermopylae, which happened in 483 before Christ, where 300 Spartans opposed a strenuous resistance against a huge Persian army, which was going to invade Greece. So the main character was Leonidas, and basically, in the plot, the Spartans were able to resist for about 3 days, but then they were betrayed by someone who actually showed the Persian how to overcome some obstacles so that Persian could attack the Spartans from behind. And who was this guy who's betrayed the Spartans? It was a guy called Ephialtes. So we got on the left the good, the righteous, the beautiful, the healthy and able Leonidas, and on the right we got the bad, the treacherous, the ugly, the sick and disabled Ephialtes. So this is really the perception of persons of disability at that time. And actually one of the first models of disability was the so-called moral model, where disability was seen as a punishment from God. Basically disability was a sort of atonement of sins that might not even be on part from the person, but even from families or even ancestors. Therefore, as disabled people had some sins, they were considered subhumans who, by definition, must be bad. In other cases, disability was seen as a test of faith, sort of gift sent by God as an opportunity to fortify character, sort of metaphysical blessing. However, in either cases, disability was associated in some way to stigma and discrimination. Now, apart from this so-called moral model of disability, the models of disability that we will examine in this presentation are more recent ones, and are basically the medical model, the social model, then the Icdh Model, which stands for International Classification of Impairment Disability and Handicap, which is a classification system of disability made by World Health Organization in the 90s. And then we will see why this model was not felt as describing appropriately disability. And finally, we will assess the current model of disability, which is the Biopsychosocial Model of disability underpinning the ICF. Now, the medical model. Basically, until 2001, there were two main models to conceptualize disability. The medical model, where disability is within the individual, and the social model, where disability is within the society. So let's have a look at the medical model. This model actually started to become somehow popular during the half of the 19th century. At that time, thanks to positivism, disability was not considered a punishment from God any longer, but it was seen as merely a deficit of some bodily function. So, persons with disability were somehow abnormal or somehow less than normal people. And actually, disabled meant less able to achieve the individual's potential, less able to have meaningful relationship, less able to play an active role in the society. So, disability here is seen as a condition where a person is not able. So, the focus is on what the person cannot do anymore. Therefore, of course, disability was a tragedy for individuals and families, so the poor disabled, the poor family, and above all, disability was a problem for the society. We have to think about on the fact that in 19th century the capitalism economical model was starting to grow, so someone who was unable to produce as other normal people was somehow a problem in the society. So therefore disability is an individual's person problem which impacts on society, and actually it's responsibility of the individual to overcome disabling barriers and problems. However, thanks to the advancement in medicine, maybe disability is a sort of disease that can be diagnosed and cured. Maybe doctors may solve these problems. You are so normal, I'm going to fix you. It's not a problem. So disabled were put in the sick role. However, this state of affairs did not change a lot the attitude towards people with disability, because they kept using words like invalid, crippled, handicapped, which do have really a bad meaning. And therefore, the social discrimination that we have seen in the moral model somehow kept going. Now, the medical model has been the mainstream model of disability for about 150 years. However, in the 70s of last century, a new model emerged. According to this new model, disability is not a problem of the individual, but disability is the consequence of the barriers which are in the society. In order to explain this model, I'll show you a very nice video that I found on YouTube, which explains perfectly what the social model is about. It's called the reversed social model, and have a look at this.
Imagine a town full of physically impaired people, all wheelchair users. They run everything. There aren't any able-bodied people, so naturally, when they built the town, the community decided it was pointless to have ceilings 10 foot high and doors 7 foot high. So the ceilings were built at 7 foot and the doors at 5 foot. In every way, they designed the place the way they wanted it. One day, a few able-bodied people come to stay. One of the first things they notice is the height of the doors. And the reason they notice is because they keep hitting their heads. They come to stand out by the bruises they carry on their foreheads. Soon doctors, psychiatrists and social workers all become involved. Committees are formed. Many people are worried about what becomes known as the problem of the able-bodied. Throughout the town there is a growth of real concern. Specially toughened helmets are handed out, free to the able-bodied, to be worn at all times. braces are designed which give support and relief, while keeping the able-bodied wearer bent to normal height. Various groups of compassionate wheelchair users get together and form registered charities. Every quarter they have a collection day. Upturned helmets are left in pubs and shops for people to drop their small change into. There is talk of founding special homes. But then one day, it dawns on the able-bodied that there is nothing actually wrong with them, just that society excludes them.
Very nice, because actually it portrays exactly the approach of the medical model, where the problem is of the individual against the social model, where actually there is nothing wrong with a person with a physical impairment. It's only the fact that the society excludes them. So in the UK, between the 1960 and the 1970, there was this Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, which started thinking about this revolutionary approach to conceptualize disability. So basically, diseases can cause impairments in terms of deficits, but however, it is the society which causes disability, and therefore disability is not simply the consequence of a disease, but is a socially constructed phenomenon. Therefore, it's not caused itself by impairments, but it is a restriction of activity caused by a disabling social organization, which takes in no account the needs of persons with impairments, thus excluding them from participation in mainstream social activities. Therefore, persons with disabilities and their allies, caregiver and other philosophers and whatever, developed the social model to help the persons with disability to take action against discrimination and to empower them to find solutions, to remove barriers, and to campaign together for equality and human rights. So basically, exclusion from society was seen as a violation, as actually should be, of a fundamental human right, which states that all humans are created equal. Therefore, limitations are imposed by society. These limitations can be organizational barrier, attitudes, and we have seen, with the previous model, what kind of attitudes are we talking about, and physical barriers. Therefore, barriers and negative attitudes limit possibilities, which don't give the opportunity to persons with disability to fulfill their full potential in terms of life opportunities. Therefore, within the social model of disability, the main focus was on providing accessibility, independence, opportunity in ways that enable individuals rather than disable them. So the focus is on what the person can do rather than, as in the previous model, the medical model, what the person cannot do. So basically the keyword is empowerment. Barriers actually can be eliminated, and changes can be made by government, public bodies, private organization, individual people. And therefore, in this way, persons with disability can achieve their full potential by increasing the access and build thus a more equal society. So this was the social model. However, in the 1980, a new model came out. We're talking about the International Classification of Impairments, Disability and Handicap. This model stems from a classification, or maybe it's the other way around. The classification stems from this model, which is based on impairments, disability and handicaps. The Icdh was commissioned and then subsequently endorsed by the World Health Organization in 1980. In order to understand how it works, let's have a look at this brief video. So basically we've got a disease like a stroke, which leads to some impairments, like in this case left hemiparesis and hemiplegic gait, which in turn lead to a disability, mainly difficulty in walking. So this person actually can walk for short distances on an even surface, but probably won't be able to walk on long distances, or maybe won't be able to perform or climbing some steps, and therefore we got a handicap, which may be loss of employment. So basically the ICDH is an attempt for a classificative and terminology standardization of the consequences of disease. So the focus again is on diseases. What is the terminology used within the ICIDH? We got impairment, disability, and handicap. Impairment is loss or abnormality affecting one anatomical structure or a physiological or psychological function. Loss or abnormality. Disability is loss or limitation of the ability to carry out an activity in a way which can be considered normal for a human being. Handicap is a disadvantage which limits or prevents the fulfillment of a role which is considered normal, depending of course on age, sex and social cultural factors for a given individual. So this is the classification. These are the main chapters. So we've got impairments on the left, disability in the middle, and handicaps on the right. As you can see in red, all the chapters which actually focus more on, in terms of language, on what a person cannot do. So this about the ICDH model. Now let's have a look at this model a little bit in more detail, because actually soon after its publication there were some criticisms towards this model. First of all, within this model, where is the disability? Is this model closer to the medical model or to the social model? Well, definitely it's a medical model of disability, and we have considered that in 1980 the social model was already around. It had been already conceptualized, so it was there, but it was not considered at all within the ICIDH. Second, it is full of negative terminology like deaf, blind, handicapped, and mad. And actually the problem with this terminology is that it gives label focusing really on what cannot be done by a person, forgetting that actually a person can shine in life regardless of his physical condition. And here we got some beautiful and outstanding examples. So two main criticism is that were that the ICDH was based on medical model. Actually, there is absolutely an absence of the social and environmental dimensions that are so important, as shown by the social model. Second, it uses a negative terminology which is somehow obsolete and stigmatizing rather than empowering persons with disability. Furthermore, there are other criticism like linear causal relationship. So we got disease, then we got impairments, then we got disability, then we got handicap. So pure medical model. The description of handicaps was somehow poor, not well conceptualized, and finally it was felt very, very complex to use and somehow heavy. As a consequence, during the 80s, it was thought that maybe the Icdh should go into a revision process, because actually the Icdh was considered an unsuccessful assessment, an attempt of classification of impairments and disabilities. It was felt that there was an important need of focusing on persons' lived experience. There was a need to know the life context of persons with disability, to understand which were the barriers in place, which were the strengths. And furthermore, it was very important to consider that disability is not really something completely separate from the concept of health, but actually is part of the concept of health. As a consequence, the World Health Organization proposed a revision process for the Icdh based on 5 main principles, which were universality, neutrality in terms of language, transculturality, equity and equivalence, adopting a biopsychosocial approach. So in summary, the Icdh focuses only on disability. It's a minority model because it cannot be applied to anyone else without a disability. It's heavily focused on medical model. Poses, the focus on the limitations on the person, but it doesn't take into account the limitations imposed by the society. It's a linear model. It's heavily based on the Western culture, where actually the medical model of disability was developed, and can only be directed to adult people. The indispensable requirements of the new model, in contrast, were that this new model should take into account disability, but should also take into account functioning. So that basically it should describe the human functioning in general. Therefore, in this way, it could become a universal model. It should incorporate not only the medical model, but also the social model, therefore considering the person within the environment. Furthermore, it should be somehow interactive, so the various components of the model should interact together, and should be also a transcultural model that could be used regardless of the culture, so not applicable only to the Western culture, but also, for instance, to the Eastern culture, and also should cover the entire lifespan from childhood to aging. And now, and it is, this is the process that led to the current process, to the current model, of disability, which is the biopsychosocial model. So the revision process took place something like 21 years, so it was not really a short process. So we started from the Icdh, then we got in 2 years 3 revised versions, which led in May 2001 to the ICF. ICF, which is the new classification of the World Health Organization, stands for International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. And as you can see, the focus really is on functioning. And from this we can understand that really the ICF is a universal model. It was ratified. The ratification took place on the 22nd of May 2001. So it was approved, and from there it was adopted by I think almost all countries in the world. What is the ICF? It's a classification system of health and of functioning and disability, which is based on a biopsychosocial model which integrates both the medical and the social models of disability. So this is basically the biopsychosocial model. So from this picture we can understand which is not a linear model. Basically this models tells us that a health condition here can cause actually interacts with body functions and body structures, with activities and participation, but also these constructs are influenced by and influence as well the environmental factors and other factors which are called personal factors. So it's quite a complex model in comparison to the linear model which we saw in the Icdh classification. The very same model which described normal functioning in the previous slide can be applied to describe disability. So in this case, we've got a disease condition which causes impairments, which causes activity limitations, which causes participation restriction, and which can be actually worsened by, for instance, barriers in the environment, in the attitudes, and whatever. Basically, the biopsychosocial model underpinning the ICF makes a sort of cultural revolution in conceptualizing disability, because the ICF tells us that any individual in any moment of his or her life may have a health condition which, in an unfavorable context, becomes a disability. So basically, disability is not something which is considered completely separate from the human experience, but it is actually part of the human experience across the span of life. So the big philosophical change underpinning the ICF is actually a completely change of focus from disability to health. As a consequence, the key questions are: how do people function, and what do they need to live their lives at their best? So basically, we are not focusing on what they cannot do, but on what they need to live at the best. And it's really a big philosophical changes after thousands of years of misconception about disability. As a consequence, this new approach should lead to stopping isolation, discrimination, segregation, and should actually promote integration. So basically, there is also not only a conceptual revolution, but also a linguistic revolution. While the Icdh was a minority model using words like handicapped, so everything that cannot be done, the ICF is a universal model which helps to classify health for any individual on Earth, and also for persons that under some circumstances may have a disability or have a disability. So this is really the whole picture. So we saw the moral model, the medical model, the social model, the Icdh model, and finally the biopsychosocial model of disability. And in the next presentation, we'll see how this new model will help actually to communicate better about disability.